I'm calling it DSLRs are finally dead. It's not an obvious statement. I know all we do is talk about mirrorless, but really still DSLRs outsell mirrorless. But I think now it's time for everybody to move on. And you know what else is dead?
What?
Putting your website up on social media. That's not good enough anymore. You need a proper website with real design that reflects your own personal sense of style. And if you want all those things in an online store and scheduling for your clients, head to squarespace.com/Chelsea. Get a totally free trial. Set your website up, make it look beautiful. And if you love it, use the coupon code Chelsea to get 10% off.
So first we want to talk about the difference between DSLRs and mirrorless in case you're not sure and you're like, so what? What are you even talking about, Tony and Chelsea? A DSLR camera has a mirror in it. That is why it's not a mirrorless camera. You look through the viewfinder, the mirror bounces whatever you see through your lens directly into your eye. What you see is just what's happening in the real world. A mirrorless camera is completely digital. There's no mirror involved getting in between you and your image. You're just looking through an electronic viewfinder and seeing what the camera is going to capture, and that's the difference. One has a mirror and one does not.
One is not inherently better than the other.
No.
But the mirrorless format does provide a little more technology flexibility. You know, you're not limited by this mirror, so you can make things silent and you can put autofocus points all over the frame, that kind of thing.
But Tony, it's dead? Now, whenever we say something is dead, people get really mad, so we're going to just get ahead of the clickbait and say, when we say dead, we just mean that DSLR technology is not where all these companies are going to be putting all of their research and development. It's not going to be the cutting edge technology. Mirrorless is taking over and becoming the most popular. What do you mean by dead, Tony?
Well, I think a technology that's alive is actively innovating and improving.
Yes.
Records are dead. Even though you can still play records, we have not seen any significant innovations in that field. And I think that's true of DSLRs now. We're going to make a case for it. We're going to talk about sales. We're going to go over the technical details of it, but I do not predict any significant innovations in the DSLR world, even with DSLR lenses. And that's why I'm finally ready to call it dead.
Yeah, and that doesn't mean you have to sell your DSLR. That doesn't mean you don't get great pictures with your DSLR. It just means that the companies are not investing as much. So.
It also doesn't mean that we think DSLRs should be dead.
No.
It's just we think this is what the camera companies are going to do. Now, a couple of years ago, Pentax came out and said that they thought mirrorless shooters were going to switch back to DSLRs. They were going to try mirrorless and be dissatisfied with the terrible experience, the poor battery life, the lousy viewfinder. Do you think that's happened?
I can understand why they said that, because I think that for a long time, mirrorless cameras left something to be desired.
Yeah.
But I don't think that's what's happening. I don't think that was a correct prediction.
I can understand why they said it, because they weren't going to make any mirrorless cameras anyway, and that's the only future that would have looked good for them.
I mean, if you say something enough, sometimes it comes true, and I do think that's kind of what happened with mirrorless. They kept saying it was better, and people believed it. I think a big part of the mirrorless hype was marketing. So yeah, maybe he was trying to undo that. I don't know.
It was kind of right for us. Like, we shot with DSLRs, we would try mirrorless all the time for like that whole decade of the 2010s.
Yeah.
But we kept going back to DSLRs. But then really, it was a couple of cameras that changed things. Like the Sony Alpha 9 had this amazing focusing system that finally made mirrorless focusing systems good. And then this year we saw the Canon R5, the Canon R6, the Sony Alpha 1, like truly revolutionary mirrorless cameras that finally made us feel like, oh, I don't ever need to touch a DSLR again. They're expensive, but good, real good.
Because it was, last year I got the R5, and up until that point I was shooting with my Nikon D850 for wildlife because I didn't like the lag of the EVF on my Sony A7R3, and so I had both. Mm-hmm. And I was able to fully switch to mirrorless this year. Do you think DSLRs could return? Like, do you think that there's any chance that people could say, well, mirrorless is too expensive, or I don't like mirrorless, and everybody just starts investing in making better DSLRs?
Well, I don't know. Let's look at film cameras, because film cameras are still around. We actually sometimes see a tiny little bit of innovation. Somebody releases some novel, new, cool film camera.
Yeah.
But at the same time, film cameras are kind of cool, and it's a nostalgic experience. Like, people still use records, and sometimes you will actually see some innovative new record player.
Yeah.
But I don't know that DSLRs have that nostalgia, right? Doesn't it feel almost like a transitional technology? Like cassette tapes aren't cool, even though records are. Even though records are older and cassette tapes are newer, cassette tapes didn't have that magic. Did DSLRs fall in that empty, that dark middle ground?
Yeah, are DSLRs one day going to feel like a film camera, or are they going to feel like the very first iPod Shuffle, where just nobody ever wants to touch one ever again?
Yeah, it's still not cool.
Yeah, I don't know. I don't think I'll have that nostalgia for a DSLR, but I think I'll still continue to have it for a film camera because I feel like the experience is different enough, and I think a film photo actually looks different.
Mm-hmm.
And that's fun. I don't know. We'll see.
So let's talk about actual mirrorless versus DSLR sales. Right now, if you were to search for the Canon EOS R5 and the 5D Mark IV at Google Trends, you'll see more people are actively looking for the 5-year-old DSLR, the 5D Mark IV, than are looking for the cutting-edge R5 mirrorless camera. And that's kind of shocking to me because us being on YouTube, getting camera companies always pushing the latest and greatest in our hands, we feel like that's all people are talking about are the new mirrorless cameras. But no, more people are talking about old DSLRs.
Yeah, well, that makes sense to me. When I talk to my friends that are shooting professionally, most of them don't have the latest and the greatest gear. They just have what works for them and the gear that they need to get the job done.
And remember travel? I remember the last time we traveled, we went to Iceland, and like not the tourist
Remember
places.
travel? I quite literally almost do not, Tony. It's been so long.
And I remember looking for mirrorless Canon and Nikon cameras versus DSLRs.
Yeah.
And everybody had a DSLR. Maybe I would spot 1 or 2 mirrorless Canon or Nikon cameras for every 100 DSLRs. The vast majority of people are shooting DSLRs, no matter what stupid YouTubers are saying.
Don't encourage them, Tony.
The same holds true if you see how many people are searching for the like 6-year-old Nikon D750 DSLR versus the brand new Z6 and Z6 II. More people are searching for the DSLRs, or about the same amount. That's where the world is. The world is still a DSLR world.
Yeah, but I think part of that is the price. DSLRs are more affordable. You can get a good DSLR used that's affordable. But the new really wonderful mirrorless cameras, like my R5, is a $4,000 camera, and the new Sony A1 is a $6,000 camera. If I weren't reviewing cameras for a living, I'd still have my Nikon D850.
Mm-hmm.
Because you have to change out all of your lenses and all your gear. It's kind of a pain. I think people are going to wait a few more years to make that switch.
Well, Canon and Nikon shooters are still more interested in DSLRs than mirrorless, but mirrorless in 2020 for the first time ever outsold DSLRs. And we can look at this chart where the mirrorless sales all the way from 2012 to 2020 is a straight line almost. Whereas DSLR sales were way up and they're now just going down. So it's kind of interesting when you look at it. Mirrorless sales have stayed even for most of the last decade, while DSLR sales have been plummeted, just completely killed by the smartphone. And if we break those sales down by the camera companies, we see, first of all, we have a lot more companies making mirrorless cameras. You have Canon, Sony, Nikon, Fuji, Olympus, Panasonic, and a few other smaller players.
Yeah.
But the numbers making DSLRs, it's pretty much Canon and Nikon. Sure, there are other companies, but they're not contributing significantly to the overall sales. If you do look at Canon and Nikon sales, we still see that those companies sell about 4 times, 5 times as many DSLRs as they do mirrorless cameras. So they're still very much DSLR companies, not mirrorless companies.
Yeah, it makes sense why they held off on offering mirrorless cameras for a little while, because their DSLRs were doing so well, and now they may be cannibalizing their own sales by offering mirrorless as well.
Yeah, Sony had this sort of brilliant move where they created an entirely new segment, the full-frame mirrorless camera, back in like 2012, I think. And they somehow used their marketing skills to make everybody want that segment, the mirrorless full-frame camera segment, even though they were the only option there.
Well, their cameras were innovative, but their marketing was also innovative. I'm pretty sure they were the first camera company using influencer marketing.
In a big way, yeah.
Yeah.
And it wasn't until really like 2018 that Canon and Nikon were finally like, okay, we can't just ignore this full frame mirrorless segment. We have to have something in there because so many people are going into that segment. And right now their only option is Sony. So suddenly
Right.
it became this very competitive segment where it went from being just Sony to being Sony, Canon, Nikon, and Panasonic. And plus Leica and a few other smaller players. Even in the used market, we're seeing mirrorless cameras finally in KEH's top 10 camera body sales.
Yeah. So KEH, they sell used gear. They're also a sponsor of ours for other videos. And they released this top 10 digital bodies of 2020. And we have some mirrorless cameras in there. It's a good sign for mirrorless.
Yeah, the number one was the Sony a6000, which used is probably like $350, $400 or so.
Yeah.
Entry level camera. But we also see the full frame Sony a7 Mark III, which is like 3 years old now, something like that. But that's like a professional grade body. Almost all the DSLRs are professional grade DSLRs. 5D Mark II, 3, 4, the Nikon D750, the 7D from Canon, the Nikon D810, for example. So we see inexpensive mirrorless cameras and then professional grade DSLRs still selling used. But mirrorless cameras are on the list for the first time, really. So I think part of predicting what a company is going to do is looking at what is going to be profitable for them. And right now, if you're Canon or Nikon, sure, 75% of people are buying DSLRs today. But if you look
Right.
historically at your entire audience, the people who own your camera bodies, and thus the people who might buy a new lens, it's more like 95 to 98% of their existing lens buyers have a DSLR. And if they make a new lens for their mirrorless cameras, that lens will not physically fit on a DSLR. So if they make a new mirrorless lens, they can only potentially sell it to like 2 to 3% of their audience with these mirrorless cameras. If they make a DSLR lens, they could adapt it to the mirrorless lens cameras, or it would go natively on all of their DSLR bodies. So financially, you would look at that and think, they're only going to make DSLR lenses for now.
Well, that's what we thought 2 years ago, because this is a follow-up to another video. And 2 years ago, we thought it made financial sense for them to stay within the DSLR world
But
for this reason.
Yeah.
But that's not true. That's not what's happening, I mean.
Yeah, we've seen almost no DSLR lens development. And so 2 years ago, we said the DSLR was not dead because we predicted they would go after cash, that they would need cash, and thus would appeal to their broader audience. But that hasn't proven to be true. I was just straight up wrong in that prediction. They have abandoned the DSLR mount. We have seen no significant DSLR lenses released by Canon or Nikon, but they have released a ton of new mirrorless lenses.
Do you think that's temporary to get within this mirrorless game? Do you think they just pumped all of their R&D into mirrorless and then eventually they'll start innovating for DSLRs again once they get some footing in the space? Or do you think it's permanent? They're never going to invest in DSLR again.
My hunch is that it's permanent. The one thing I think might change it is Nikon, who's struggling financially, might bring in a partner who decides that they can make money by selling DSLR lenses. And in that case, they might go for cash and actually appeal to that large audience. If I were running Nikon, I would be a DSLR company, I think. I don't
Really?
even think I would decide to compete against Sony and Canon in this full frame mirrorless segment. I think I would just make the world's greatest DSLRs.
I think that's an incredibly difficult choice to make, and I'm not sure what they're going to do.
Yeah, and we'll just have to kind of wait and see, because the decisions they make today are going to be a little different than the decisions they make after a few more quarters of losing money.
Yeah. What about the 2020 mirrorless versus DSLR sales by value? So not how many units they're selling, but how much money they're making from selling each.
This leans heavily towards mirrorless cameras. About 2/3 of every dollar spent is spent on mirrorless cameras versus DSLRs. And what that means is DSLRs are selling almost as many as mirrorless in 2020, but people are buying less expensive DSLRs and people are buying more expensive mirrorless cameras.
I think those people that want the latest and the greatest and have the money to do it, they're not looking for a deal. They just want those new features. They want the coolest new camera. They're watching the videos that are coming out from people and they're excited and they're spending a ton of money.
Yeah, they're the dentists of the world, right? Like they have some disposable income, they have some free time. I threw out the dentist reference in an earlier video and people got very excited about it, especially dentists.
I feel like it's you, the Tony Northrops of the world too, because even before we were doing this for a living, if something new came out, you just wanted to try it. You just love new technology.
It's true. It's fun. Right?
Yeah.
It doesn't even have to be better if it's fun. That's okay. Stuff can be fun.
So maybe not dentists, maybe rich nerds. You're a rich nerd. Do, do, do. I'll make a theme song for you guys.
But it becomes a little circular because we as YouTubers provide a significant amount of the overall promotion and marketing for these new camera bodies. And did we have any interest in reviewing the new DSLR, the Nikon D780?
Well, it's not that we didn't have interest. They didn't ask us. They didn't approach us. They didn't send us a body. And that kind of like a light bulb went off when we were writing this podcast, because I'm thinking, well, we haven't really reviewed DSLRs, but nobody's been asking us to. There's been no hype. Nobody emails us about new DSLRs and if we're getting one. The companies don't reach out. We haven't had any meetings about new DSLRs. And just to let you know, if there's a new camera like the R5, the companies contact us. They send us press materials. They want to have meetings on the phone with us, and then they send us a body. And that's not happening with DSLRs.
No, Canon has been in close contact with every new mirrorless camera release, but they have not contacted us at all about the Canon 90D. Or the 1DX Mark III. We just didn't hear from them.
Of course,
put the effort in.
We're a sample size of one. Maybe they feel there is a different YouTuber that would be better at marketing that. That's also a possibility. I haven't seen those videos, so if you have, you can comment about that. But it seems like they're not putting their marketing dollars into DSLRs either.
Yeah, but this is a factor. Like they can make a new DSLR, but if it's not going to be sexy to the YouTube audience, then it might not get enough market share for people to even know that it exists, much less go out and buy it.
So another question I had when we were making this is, why did DSLRs have to die in the first place? I think DSLRs are great. And like I said, I'd probably still be shooting with my D850 if it weren't my job to review all the new gear. It seems like you could innovate. It seems like you could make a hybrid DSLR that has an EVF. It seems like you should be able to put autofocusing points to the edge of the sensor.
You absolutely could.
So why don't they just build a newer, greater DSLR? Is it actually that a DSLR is at enough of a disadvantage over a mirrorless camera that you want to just scrap the whole format? Or is it more that this new mirrorless camera is so sexy to people and sounds so cool that that's just what people want because of all the marketing hype?
Yeah, I think it's the latter. I think if you were to actually put R&D into DSLR lenses, for example, you could do a lot. And people will talk about, the flange distance and the size of the mount, but that seems to be mostly marketing because we had great lenses for DSLRs. And I do agree with wide angle stuff, there could be some advantages. But with 50 millimeters and up, most of the time when I look at the mirrorless lens designs, they're not even taking advantage of the wider opening or the reduced flange distance. Like that same lens could exist for DSLRs, but it doesn't. Nobody's making it.
But at the same time, the larger flange difference isn't an advantage ever. So why would you improve a DSLR? I mean, you could.
Just for compatibility with all the millions of people who own that gear.
Yeah, but I guess I'm saying you could improve it, but why would you? Especially if they're making more money from this new format, which is mirrorless.
Yeah, but people looked at pictures and been like, oh, the grain of that film is fantastic. The color on this picture is great. Oh, it's very sharp. They must have had lots of megapixels and good optics, but nobody's ever said, oh, that was definitely taken on a mirrorless camera.
Yeah.
Because they don't produce different images.
That is a good point. So coming up, we're going to be talking about which companies we think will survive based on the numbers and their innovating and what they're currently doing in the market. But first, we want to take a moment to thank our sponsor, Squarespace. We definitely think you need a Squarespace portfolio. Tony and I both have them, and social media just doesn't cut it if you want to show off your best photos because it's chronological and it's not that beautiful and it's a distracting place that people don't visit when they want to hire you. So get your very own Squarespace for free. You can get it for 14 days. And you don't need a credit card. You don't have to remember to cancel. You just drag your photos in, see how beautiful they are, and bask in all the glory of people complimenting you on your very own professional website. Go to squarespace.com/Chelsea and click on the link down below in the description. And then when you want to go live with your website, use the coupon code Chelsea to get 10% off. And that saves you money and also lets Squarespace know that we're doing a good job.
It's a good way to make money with your pictures too. You know, I sell prints on my site, and I have for years, and I have it linked up to Stripe, so people can pay with Apple Pay or a credit card or whatever, and then it automatically goes into ShipStation, and with one click, I just print a label out, slap it on an envelope, and off it goes. They make it so streamlined.
It is easy.
So let's look at the market share for 2020 camera sales.
Okay.
And nobody's going to get this right, because it seems like, based on the amount of YouTube coverage, that Sony is selling 90% of cameras.
Yeah.
And then Canon is selling more R5s than anything else, but that's not actually true. Like, Canon has more than 45% of the market share
They have a huge
for overall cameras.
Yes, yeah.
Followed distantly by Sony at only 20%, followed by now Nikon in third place at 18.6%. And then everybody else has a very small piece of the pie.
Yeah, like Fuji, 4.7%, Panasonic, 4.7%, like small compared to Canon.
Yeah. And if you compare those numbers to 2019, we see that Canon grew by 2.4%, probably because of the amazing success of the R5 and R6 mirrorless cameras.
Yeah.
Sony grew by almost 1%, but they're the only companies that grew as the market share. They took market share mostly from Nikon, who lost 1.6% overall, including DSLRs. And Fuji lost just 0.4%, mostly probably to Canon and Sony. And then Panasonic is kind of holding steady with a pretty small piece of the pie.
Yeah.
And do you feel like that trend is going to continue with Canon and Sony growing market share at everybody else's expense?
I think 2020 is going to just be an overall unusual year. And also, I think that Nikon is going to come out with their flagship mirrorless camera, and that might change things. That might finally get some Nikon shooters switching. So I'm hoping to see that Nikon stabilizes a little bit. I don't know, Tony. I got a lot of hope kind of influencing my thoughts here. What's probably going to happen is that this pattern is going to continue, but I'm hoping that Nikon's flagship mirrorless camera stops this loss that they're experiencing.
It's tough in a rapidly shrinking market like this. If you have a growing market, you can have a lot of players who carve out individual niches, but in a shrinking market, it kind of goes to the biggest companies who can thus afford to put the most into research and development.
Well, that's what I feel like is happening. Like Canon and Sony are pumping so much money into their new cameras and their marketing. And the only thing that they have to do is just further suppress the sales of the companies that are already struggling. And if they can cut them out, they can get a bigger piece of a shrinking pie with the camera industry having a year after year decline in sales. That's what they absolutely need to do. And so that's probably what we're going to see.
Yeah, it is tough when you see a Nikon, for example, cutting their R&D. We don't have worldwide numbers for Nikon's mirrorless market share, but in Japan, their market share is only 4.6%. Their DSLR market share is almost 45%. So they're a DSLR company. They're not making huge headway with their Z-mount mirrorless lenses and cameras. And they seem to have completely given up on the Nikon One mount. So they're really struggling in the one section that isn't shrinking. And that makes me think that they might continue to lose market share. I also want to bring up the fact that we've been talking about stills photography a lot, but stills photography is overall not growing in the same way that video is. You know, we've seen some trends that continue to push people towards video, like increasing bandwidth amounts, more powerful smartphones that can display video, 5G that can stream high quality video everywhere.
You also see what camera companies are marketing, like the Canon R5, they push that 8K video really heavily.
And that's what people got excited about.
Yeah.
So more and more cameras are not bought only to shoot stills, but to be hybrid cameras that can shoot both stills and video. And of these companies that we talk about, 3 of them produce hybrid stills and video cameras, but they also produce video-focused cameras. Sony, Canon, and Panasonic all make video-focused cameras. And that is a synergy that works out really well for them, because that video tech can then go into their stills cameras and make these amazing hybrid cameras. Fuji, Nikon, Pentax, Olympus, they do not make dedicated videographer-centric cameras, and thus they don't get to take advantage of that. And maybe those companies are at a pretty significant disadvantage as we continue this trend towards a video-centric world.
So you think that the camera companies that are putting more weight into video and mirrorless capabilities are more likely to be successful in the long run?
Yeah, long run, I think we're looking at a trend towards mirrorless cameras and video cameras. And in the past, it was all about DSLR cameras and stills cameras. So I think one predictor of future success is going to be how the companies have succeeded in shifting to mirrorless and video. And really, probably the number one company at this is Panasonic. That's always been their niche. And it's actually very forward-looking. You know,
Yeah.
all their GH cameras were video-centric, and for the longest time, our studios were based on mirrorless Panasonic video cameras. They have always been great at that. Sony and Canon have also for years produced mirrorless video cameras as well as these hybrid cameras. So I think they're all really well positioned. Canon, in fact, has a mix of all of these kind of cool things. They sell lots of stills DSLRs, but they also have mirrorless video cameras. Like they have a foot in every pond.
Yeah, but it seems like Nikon has kind of lagged and has been hesitant to do that. I mean, you see the marketing where they're saying they have video cameras, but they're not really putting in the features that people that want video need. One of those things is like a side-facing flip screen. I don't know why they're lagging with putting that out. And
yeah, it's like they don't think YouTubers exist. I know not the whole world is YouTubers, but its creators are actually a massive marketplace that they don't cater to at all.
well, it's kind of interesting because I was just thinking of this. Like Sony really caters to that demographic, and maybe they do because those are the people reviewing the cameras, so you want to make them happy so that the review is good. But it seems like Nikon is not catering to that demographic as much. And I hear a lot of still shooters say, like, I don't care about video, that doesn't concern me. But if the people reviewing the cameras care about video, suddenly it becomes important to the overall brand.
Yeah, and if you look at Canon and Sony and their market share is increasing and the Nikon market share is decreasing, well, it could be putting your entire company at risk because you can't be too specialized, you know?
Yeah.
So in one extreme corner of focusing entirely on stills DSLRs, we have Pentax. We have Nikon trying to be mirrorless video, but not really succeeding in that space. And then we have companies like Fuji and Olympus, who have always been mirrorless, but never really took off in the video space. Like they have video capabilities, but they didn't really get a lot of traction with serious filmmakers or even YouTubers.
Okay, now Tony, this is the part of the video where you make some predictions about who will survive, and you do it in that Tony Northrup way where you're just blunt and inflammatory. So why don't you just let it all out?
It is my goal to be straightforward,
Yes.
not to be inflammatory. People feel inflamed by me trying my best to predict the future.
Yeah.
But I just beg you not to shoot the messenger. I think this is,
You could be more diplomatic.
I don't have any interest in that. I think Olympus is out.
Yeah.
But they exited the camera business, that's it. Now JIP will make Olympus OMD cameras, and I think they will sell you some cameras.
Yeah, but they're not going to be the most highly innovated cameras. They're not going to be pouring money into figuring out how to have the best autofocus or something.
Yeah.
They're
the
just
innovation
selling
space.
Olympus lovers more Olympus stuff.
Dead.
Oh, okay. He's not trying to be inflammatory. Okay.
Pentax is still technically around, but they have been very vocal about not making mirrorless cameras. They're not a video camera company. Mm-hmm. They are proudly making DSLR stills in a market that is rapidly shrinking, and we've seen no innovation from them for years. But they're not. There's people still work for Pentax, a few of them at least, but they're dead.
Do you see what I'm dealing with here? This is why I can't read the comments for my own mental health anymore. Okay, Tony, keep it going. Go ahead, keep it rolling. Okay. Oh, this one's my favorite. Yeah, go ahead, say it.
Panasonic is doing okay. We reviewed the S5, $2,000 full frame.
It
was
says
great.
right there, Panasonic should probably give up. Now, why don't you read what you wrote and just let the hate rain on you?
I think Panasonic is doing a great job, but I think their space is far too crowded, and I do not think they'll be able to invest enough in research and development to catch up or surpass Canon or Sony. And thus, they've abandoned the Micro Four Thirds mount almost entirely. I expect to see a GH6, but they really haven't been doing any innovation in there. They have refused to create a decent phase detect autofocus system, which has been an extremely important differentiator for both stills and video in the mirrorless segment, and they are very far behind and refusing to even play that game. And they decided to make this L-mount thing, which is a partnership that, looking at it after a couple of years, doesn't seem to be working out.
Okay.
I can't imagine a scenario where Panasonic gets enough market share to be profitable for the company. And I would suggest they throw in the hat. They go the way of Samsung exited the camera industry completely.
Yeah.
And they were smart about it.
This
They
is
exited
like-
before they could lose too much money.
This is like, you can't tell someone to throw in the hat. They've got to do it in their own time.
Yeah, I don't expect them to listen. And I want to be clear. I'm not saying Panasonic cameras are bad or that nobody should buy them.
Yeah.
I just think the way the industry is that it cannot be profitable, and corporations don't exist for love or passion. They exist to make money. And I don't see that that's going to be possible for Panasonic cameras.
Okay.
Fuji, on the other hand,
Yeah.
like, whereas Panasonic is competing in this full-frame mirrorless space against these monsters of Sony and Canon with tons of research and development,
Tons of money.
Fuji's carved out its own little unique niches, and it's actually looking like a pretty smart move.
Hey, I think that they've got a good chance, and they've got this cult following that's really dedicated. I don't feel like Fuji has ever been in a space where they're trying to have the latest and the greatest. They just got their own thing going on.
Yeah, so the X-mount has always been small, stylish fun, and they have been competing fiercely with Panasonic and Olympus Micro Four Thirds cameras for that segment, but Olympus is gone. Panasonic seems to be dropping out of Micro Four Thirds, so suddenly they're the only small, fun, stylish camera you can buy.
You know who I think is trying to take their segment?
Who's that?
Sony. Because they released the A7C, and it was like this little compact camera, and it had some little analog dials on it, and then it had that silver top. You know, it was cute, it was compact, it was fun. I just thought, they're coming after Fuji.
Yeah, that could be pretty scary for Fuji. They'll have to keep their eye out on that.
We'll see what they come up with next. If Sony comes out with another more Fuji-like camera, that could be concerning for Fuji.
But I still feel like they have a comfortable niche there. And they also make medium format cameras. And previously they competed with the Pentax medium format camera, which seems to be gone. So once again, they're the only player. And when we've tested the medium format cameras, we haven't been like, okay, objectively they have these advantages. The pictures look better. The pictures don't look better. Like, they're the same. But there's still this mystique of medium format that I think will draw enough of an audience. And it's parallel to like Leica for me.
Yeah, you think it's like
Leica's
niche.
still making cameras because people love Leica.
People love Leica, and people
people
really
love
do
medium
love
format.
Fuji. People love Fuji.
So I feel like Fuji's pretty solid position.
All right, you think they can hold up? They refused to play on Sony's playing field when everyone was just going to that full frame mirrorless. They were like, no, we're good where we are.
And a lot of people said they need to be making full frame mirrorless cameras, but I think they were smart to just avoid playing that game. They weren't going to win it.
True.
And I think really the most difficult camera company to discuss is Nikon, because they have been number 2 for decades.
Yeah.
But their direction is tough. They're still a DSLR stills company, and they don't want to be. They want to be a mirrorless video-centric company, but all the buyers want their DSLRs still.
I don't know what to predict for them. I know you said earlier that you think some other company is going to come in and make them stick to DSLRs, but I'm not sure. And I do know they have their flagship mirrorless coming out, and I'm holding out hope that that will get people to switch and that they'll have this infusion of money and they'll be able to stabilize a little bit to stay in the game.
Yeah, we have for years said that they were making a mistake by cutting their R&D and their
Yeah.
marketing, that they actually needed to invest in those spaces if they were going to stay alive. And I still wish they could find an investor, find some cash so that they could catch up and fight the fight against Sony and Canon. But that hasn't been the path that they've taken over the past couple of years. They slow it down, they cut their budget. And you can see it in the cameras. Like, we did not really compare the Z7 Mark II against the Canon EOS R5 or the Sony Alpha 1. Like, that's their flagship mirrorless currently, but it does not compare. They don't have the same technology. They aren't even in this high-end mirrorless segment at all.
But they have the high-end name, and like we've said in other videos, people love their Nikons and they trust the brand and they want to stay in the Nikon system. And so
that's their biggest asset.
That is their biggest
massive
asset.
number, millions of customers with Nikon cameras who are loyal.
Yeah, and I love my D850. I said I was going to sell it and I still have it. You know, people love their DSLR, so I guess we'll see what happens with them. I don't even feel comfortable making a prediction. I think this is the one brand where I feel a little emotional. Like, I can't come to terms with the idea of them not surviving this.
Well, I want to be clear. I'm not going to scream dead about Nikon because I don't feel that way at all.
What a gentleman.
I feel like they have so many customers out there that they will be able to continue to create products that they need, that those customers will buy. And so I feel like they are going to be around for a while. But I also don't feel like they're going to be the technology leaders. And they have some significant disadvantages in not being diversified in video cameras, and they also don't make their own sensors, which means that they have to pack a little profit margin in for the sensor manufacturer in every camera, which means their cameras are going to have a difficult time competing on price.
Okay, now let's get to the two big players we've been talking about, which is the Canon R mount and the Sony E mount. Do you think that the industry will only be big enough for 2 or 1 camera companies?
I definitely think they are both going to go back and forth. Like, I don't think one of them is going to beat the other.
I do think that they're trying to starve out the smaller competitors.
Yeah, I think they are mostly fighting against Nikon, Fuji, Panasonic, Olympus, and in this shrinking market, all those other companies are going to continue to shrink, while these two companies continue to gain market share, as they have for the past year. And it's actually important to know as a camera buyer, because you kind of do want to be on the winning side of things, right? Because that's where the most new products are going to come out in 5 years. That's where the most new innovation is going to be. And you are making a long-term investment in a system that is not that easy to break out of once you buy into it.
That's true. It can be difficult to change systems and sell all of your used gear. That can be tough.
2 years ago, I would have said it looks like Sony is going to solidly beat Canon in the mirrorless, that Canon won't be able to keep up with the tech. But then they released the R5 and the R6, and I was like, okay, Canon can keep up. Like, they're in the game.
Yeah, that was really surprising. I guess we'll just have to wait and see, possibly do another update video in a few years and see if we were wrong, see if we were right.
I want to be clear, like, camera mounts do die. Like, there was the Samsung NX that a lot of people bought, and now they can't buy any new bodies or lenses. Even though their gear continues to work, they're stuck, and they're going to be forced to switch systems even when they don't want to. Same applies for the Nikon 1 mount, the Sony A mount, the Pentax 645 mount. Like, those users, I talked to them. They're frustrated. They bought a camera system that was a dead end, and that's what we're trying to avoid now, is to give you the information you need.
So why don't you explain to people your innovation chart? Because you tried to predict who's going to be innovating to kind of spare people the pain of buying into a system that's going to leave them stranded without any new highly innovative gear, if that's what you're interested in.
So I've taken these mounts and divided them into 3 tiers. The ones that I consider to be the top innovators. Well, there will continue to be new cool gear coming out. The middle tier, where they will not be keeping up with those top tier, but you'll be able to continue to buy new things, and I feel comfortable that they're going to be developed for, in, say, 5 years. And then the bottom tier, where I am uncertain that we're going to see much, if any, innovation. There might be new products, but nothing is going to be like, whoa, cool, I've never seen that before, and that's sincerely useful. We're going to see, a new form factor, or some new software bits, but we're not going to see any big leap, anything exciting.
And I felt the pain of this happening. I mean, I was shooting the Nikon D850 with a 600 millimeter lens, and when we got the Canon in, their new 600 millimeter lens was like 3 pounds lighter, like a really significant weight difference, much smaller. They had redesigned it. It was more innovative because they could fit it in a smaller form factor and have it also weigh less. And I started realizing like, oh, that I'm not going to get that update with my lens probably. It's not on the horizon. I don't see it. Nobody's talking about it.
Yeah, and if it does come, it's going to be years later
Yeah.
than Canon and Sony. So do you want the good news first or the bad news first?
Let's start with the bad news so that we can end this on a more positive note.
Okay, in the bottom tier, where I don't see a lot of innovation happening, we have the Canon EOS DSLR mount and the Nikon F DSLR mount. I think there is the opportunity for innovation, but those companies are not going to invest. It's a choice.
Okay.
I also think Canon is done with the mirrorless M mount. We haven't seen much new happening there, and it's confusing that they would have two separate mirrorless mounts with very similar capabilities, and I think at some point Canon, in the next couple of years, Canon is just going to decide to put all the new R&D into the R mount. I've been predicting that for years though, and they just keep making M mount stuff. So
You know that the compact camera sales are actually picking up a little bit?
Oh, really?
Yeah, when I was looking through all of those SEPA charts and bar charts and everything, I was surprised to see that the compact camera market is seeing a little uptick. So maybe they'll continue to invest.
I think Pentax is straight up dead. I think for Micro Four Thirds, we're going to see a new Panasonic GH6, and OMD is going to release some new Olympus camera, but again, there's not going to be big innovation in there. And then for the Panasonic L mount, like, they seem to be working at it. I do think we'll see some cool new stuff for the next couple of years, but then I think a little further out, like looking 3 to 5 years and more, I think it will have trickled off to the point where we won't see much at all from them. My middle tier, where we're going to see moderate innovation, but not class-leading innovation, I have in that segment the Fujifilm GFX medium format and the Nikon Z mount. I don't expect them to go anywhere. You'll continue to be able to buy products for it, but you're not going to be getting the coolest stuff. The best toys are...
Yeah, which might not matter if you're not interested in buying the most expensive stuff either, so...
But if you do want that high-end stuff, if you want the latest and greatest, if you're just a geek who likes toys like me, I think the systems you can feel most comfortable in are going to be the Canon EOS R full-frame mount, the Sony Alpha full-frame mirrorless mount, and then the Fujifilm X mount. I expect them to continue to receive significant research and development.
I agree with that.
Thanks.
Which is why I went to my R5.
Yeah, it's amazing.
It is amazing. I love it. Thank you, Squarespace, for making this podcast possible. If you want to support our podcast and support yourself by making a beautiful website, you can go to squarespace.com/Chelsea. You can just drag and drop and make a gorgeous professional looking website. And it even has really professional options like a password protected space where you can send your clients to see their photos. And you can get all that for free for 14 days. Until you want to go live, and then you can get 10% off with the coupon code Chelsea. So thank you. And everyone, tell us what you think in the comments down below. Which camera companies do you think are going to innovate the most? And which companies do you think are completely done innovating or have slowed down so much that it's not going to be good for people that buy into their system?
And is the DSLR dead, or are we going to continue to see some amount of innovation? Who is going to be making the cool new DSLRs if that's going to happen?
Yeah, I'm curious to see if they do innovate a new DSLR. That'd be interesting. That'd be a real twist, Tony.
Thanks and bye.
Thanks and bye.
You did it too.